if you've lost credibility, do you think it's possible to build it back up again?
Hey, friendo, Steve here.
And Larson.
And you're watching Tom Talks Rubbish.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talks Rubbish, and today I'm back with another interview. This time, I'm joined by Connor Cassidy from the comic book site. I feel like I butchered that, and I do apologize.
It's all right, mate. It's Connor Casey, and it's comicbook.com. Yeah, we're owned by CBS, so we are one of their big entertainment websites. We cover everything from any kind of geek news you could possibly think of: movies, TV, anime, gaming, and of course wrestling.
What was the geek news that got you into their site then?
Well, for them, they were honestly looking for a wrestling person because they kind of realized a few years back that wrestling fans tend to act the same way that comic book fans, anime fans, gaming fans, we all act kind of the same way. We have our preferences. We're very passionate, especially on social media.
Oh, yes.
And we love to learn as much as we can. We love to learn as much as we can about the product itself. And they were trying to expand with that. And that's how I wound up there.
How did you get into wrestling in the first place then?
Okay. So I was 10 years old and I had a best friend who lived next door, and he was a classic Attitude Era wrestling fan. I completely missed that whole era. I mean, I was, to show my age, I was born in 93. So by the time, you know, the Attitude Era is done, I'm not even 10 yet. So fast forward to 03, he invites me over for a sleepover, and he had bought the that year's Royal Rumble pay-per-view, and that was, for those who don't remember, that was Benoit Angle. That was the regrettable Triple H Steiner match, which really, I remember that one more than I did. I remember that one, weirdly enough, more than I did the Angle match. But what stuck out the most by far was Lesnar winning the Rumble that year. And, you know, I just jumped on from there. I didn't start watching in earnest until the next year when Eddie won the title. I was a SmackDown guy growing up, more so than Raw. That's just kind of how that one worked out. And stuck with it. Didn't really start following the media side of things until I'd say 07, 08, right in the prime of, you know, the Cena years. And been writing about it professionally since 2015.
What was it, if we unpack it a little bit, what was it, do you think, about Steiner Triple H? Because that's not a good wrestling match per se. What do you think it is that helps that one stick in your brain?
I think it was the big personalities at the time. I mean, you know, sitting down to watch it, I didn't know what a good wrestling match looked like. So when you had these two massive, you know, beefy guys, for some reason that stuck out more than, you know, any sort of like, that's the infamous that's the Dawn Marie Tori Wilson match too. And I remembered that one simply for the goofy Al Wilson video package that played before it.
Okay.
So I think it was the big characters that stuck out, I think. And then, you know, Brock just being larger than life made him pretty easy to stand out.
Okay. So how does that then change to when following it full time, when someone more athletic like Eddie Guerrero is on top?
Sure. So you mean like now, or as I just grew up?
No, like, because you said you didn't start properly following it until Eddie had won the title. Was there a specific reason or correlation there?
No, that was really just, I didn't know what channel it was on. So I didn't stumble upon it on here in the States. It's on UPN. SmackDown was on UPN, and just randomly flipping through one night. I think this was just when it was still on Thursdays. I just randomly found it and went, oh, so this is when it's on every night, every week. So that was honestly just kind of how that happened.
How did you feel then? Because obviously when you were watching in 2003, I know there's only a year difference, but the bigger guys were on top. And then you've got someone like Eddie Guerrero now, who's more athletic. What was your thoughts on the change in wrestling in a year?
So the funny thing to me, and this is true even now, is that I never look at a match and judge the quality based off of how big the guy is. I never look at a Bryan Danielson or an AJ Styles match and think, wow, that match would be so much better if those two were 6 feet tall. No, that's never, that thought has never crossed my mind, because they're both fantastic. They're two of my favorites. The size thing, it just kind of, I just kind of brushed off on it to where, because frankly, I was more enthralled with Eddie just being this likable character. Guys like Angle and JBL just being despicable. And I connected with that much more than, wow, JBL's got a foot worth of height on Eddie. That never fazed me for a second.
Okay. And then you spoke about sort of in 2007, discovering the wrestling media almost. What was it that you discovered?
It was honestly just, I think I was just on Google and was just searching for like wrestling news. And I didn't know that there was an entire community of podcasters, of bloggers, people with the inside scoops. What was funny was I didn't stumble on to like Meltzer until probably a couple years after that. I really started with guys that had the free sites. Mike Johnson with PW Insider comes to mind. Wade Keller's daily Pro Wrestling Torch podcast. There's a couple of years there where I listened to it every day. The pro, I don't know if you remember this one. It was called the Pro Wrestling Report. It was two guys based out of, they're out of Milwaukee. And Damian Nelson, who hosts, I've seen him on Fight from time to time nowadays. So if you know that one, you might recognize that name. And I just started gathering that, people have kind of the inside track to what's going on backstage. And I found that fascinating because, you in school, when you try to learn about journalism, it's not like they tell you, hey, that's a career path you can take. That's something you can do. Just, it never came up. So just to learn that, I became as enthralled with that as I was with the weekly product, which at that time, if you recall, wasn't great. And it got worse before it started to get a little bit better.
Mm-hmm. 2007, there's obviously something very infamous that happened with the Chris Benoit tragedy. So how did finding I need to call it the MCU then, the Internet Wrestling Community, IWC, I should say. How did finding that, and then obviously the Benoit tragedy happening at the same time, how did that affect your love of wrestling?
For anybody that was, even though I missed, and it hurt. It was shocking to learn more details as they came out. I guess learning that there was such a strong online community kind of told me that I wasn't alone in dealing with that situation. You have your trolls and you have your naysayers out there, but there are some genuinely good people in what's called the IWC. I've met some of them. They're great people. It's, I guess that in a little way was, there's a little bit of hope there, I guess, if you want to put it that way, if I want to sound incredibly cheesy, but
if you're trying to put a positive spin on it. Yeah,
exactly.
But how do you think, and we're getting quite deep here, so I do apologize. So how do you think the IWC coming alive as it did affected the way the Benoit tragedy was maybe handled?
I don't know if they played as much of a role in that at so much as like when it happened, I remember the episode, the ESPN shows that were covering it as hard news alongside, your daily sports news. I remember, the wrestlers popping up on CNN and the other 24/7 news networks to talk about it. I feel like that I remember after it happened, talking about the murder, the suicide, all the details, like the fact that all of these news outlets that I had been, I just knew about just growing up here in the States, the fact that they were covering it in a subject that would otherwise never be brought up.
No.
For the longest time, ESPN was not talking about pro wrestling. Things have changed, and I can get into that in a bit. But at the time, I think that really stood out to me as like, oh, wow, this is national news. This is a big deal. This isn't just something that, oh, hey, this is what happened in wrestling this week, and then the world goes on. Like, people stopped and paid attention to all of this for a minute. That's what I really took away from that.
If something as unspeakable and tragic as the Benoit tragedy was to happen today, in your line of work, do you think you would struggle to cover it because you're such a wrestling fan? Or do you think you'd have to put on your professional hat and be like, right, this is my job. I've got to do this, even though it's upsetting. And do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't struggle with that. I went to school to be a journalist. I still consider myself a journalist. No matter how goofy the subject I cover may be, that is what I still consider myself to be.
Yeah.
So when serious news like that comes up, I don't hesitate. When Shad Gaspard tragically passed away, saving his son, I didn't hesitate. We dove right into the details of it, everything with the Coast Guard and him rescuing his son before he submerged. Like, I didn't steer away from that. When wrestlers die, whether if it's of old age or tragically young, we go straight forward at it and cover it. And you kind of have to swallow your emotions, and you can let that stuff come up later because, hey, we're people. But when you're on the clock and when you're doing your job, you gotta be a professional.
Do you think that maybe your fandom makes it easier to cover it in some ways sometimes because you've watched these people? I hope that question made sense.
Yeah, it does. Being a fan of it in general, I think helps in that it makes it easier to enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
And I can appreciate things from a different perspective. Like if it's somebody that if it's wrestlers that are in the ring that I've interviewed or I've talked to, or I've kind of learned more about what their lives were like, whether the cameras aren't rolling or growing up. I can appreciate it when they find success in the ring, and that I kind of can embrace that. But I don't let my fandom get in the way of like, oh, this is objectively something good on TV, or this is objectively something bad. You can put on your critical hat and kind of look at it from that point of view. So yeah, I guess to get back to the original question, yeah, being a fan affects it in some ways, but never stops me from actually doing my job. If that
I
makes
get
sense.
you. Yeah, you talked about putting on your critical hat there. Can you take it off when, say, like you're like, okay, I don't have to cover this, but I'm going to stick on, for example, we're recording this the day after Revolution. Can you sit back and watch something like that for fun? Or is wrestling
Absolutely
a job now?
No. When I'm not working, I'm still watching. I don't. So for my website each week, I don't cover NXT. I have another writer that does that for me. But back in the black and gold era, I was still watching every week. We don't cover New Japan to the level that I cover WWE or AEW. But I still follow that stuff. That's still I'm still watching that on my phone or on my computer. during my off hours. That's the only time, I'll be honest, the only time wrestling ever feels like work is Monday Night Raw at this point, which is unfortunate because
That's been
I've
a
spent so many
common
years checking that show out.
Yeah.
Is that something that a lot of people have said?
That's come up a lot, yeah.
Yeah, it's the fact that it's 3 hours and the fact that it's so many rematches each week, and you come away from the show feeling like not a lot has happened. Like even in the past couple of years, I'd say 3 years ago, if you told me, hey, watch this episode of Raw and write whatever important happens on it, I could get you 4 to 5 stories out, no problem. There have been episodes in the past 18 months where I've written nothing because nothing of, or one story because so little of substance actually happened, or so little reaction on social media that I can't even take that angle of, hey, people are raving or ranting about this one particular thing. Like there's just such apathy around the show right now that's what makes it feel like work. Give me going to AEW pay-per-views and staying up way past when the show is over to do media scrums and write out stories at the end of the day. Give me that any day of the week over having.
Were you at Revolution?
I was not at I was not. Last AEW show I did was All Out in Chicago last year. And that was a long night. That was a great show, but that was a long night.
How do you think that basically going to wrestling events live impacts how you cover them in your write-ups?
I recognize that being at the show, if say I'm in a press box and I'm writing about what's happening on the show as it happens, I recognize that I'm probably going to enjoy something just a little bit more because I'm there. That's just natural. But I don't let it affect how I'm writing, or I'm not really analyzing the quality of something while I'm there. That's usually in the days and weeks that follow. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't say it affects me much. I really do enjoy the press conferences that AEW does after their pay-per-views. WWE doesn't really do that. They'll give us a press box to work in for the big events, but we're not talking to the wrestlers after the fact, or we're not talking to Triple H or Vince after the fact. It's usually, finish up your stories and back to the hotel. Whereas with AEW, it goes back to, it makes me feel like I'm back to covering sports, because before I was doing this, that was my background. I was a sports journalist, and that made it feel more like a sporting event, because I could go ask the wrestlers moments after they've just done something insane. Hey, what's going through your mind? How do you feel? What's your reaction to all of this? I feel like we get much more personal responses through that from guys like, I don't know if you watched the post-show scrum for Revolution, but
have you seen the Punk one?
Oh yeah, I was
just going to ask you about that.
Punk, God bless him, he about near broke down 3 different times, and you're not gonna get that from a 15-minute phone interview on a random Monday or Tuesday. That him opening up like that raw emotion, it's hard to find, but when you find it, it makes for some of the best stories. So that's why I absolutely love those kinds of opportunities.
Do you think, and I'm very curious to know what you think, because I've asked a lot of people in the internet wrestling community this question. Do you think the fact that AEW is more open with how stuff is put together, like you see Tony Khan on Busted Open, what feels like every week at the minute, like
pretty much, yeah.
And then you see like stories and that coming out, and obviously they do press events afterwards. Do you think that's maybe why the internet wrestling community is more, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this, like is more willing to paint AEW with a positive light because they give the internet wrestling community more access?
I think it certainly helps. But the the access, it's different for each company. You'll notice that with WWE, look at the past few weeks. There are so many leaks. So many people have inside sources within the creative team, within the production team, within the wrestlers themselves, to where we knew about Austin. Whatever they're planning with him, we've been hearing about it since mid February.
Yeah.
We hear every update there is on Cody Rhodes, whether he is or isn't coming into the company. We knew about Johnny Knoxville versus Sami Zayn weeks before they did it. I feel like with AEW, there's not as many leaks. It's more of a tight-knit community in that sense. But getting back to your question, transparency always helps. That is, I feel like that's true in any industry. The more transparent you are, the more people that follow your product, they feel more connected to it, because they're being granted this information that they might not be given elsewhere. I think when it comes to the IWC, and I don't intend for everybody, EW are more positive leaning, simply because there was such a long period of time when WWE was the only game in town, and all you had to do was watch Raw, complain about it for a week, and then pray it's better the next week. Now that you have this alternative, people just want it to be good. People want great wrestling. So when they see here's a new company with all this potential and a great roster and somebody at the helm who's clearly, he said it himself. He was one of us. He was on the message board. He was a tape trader. I feel like they feel like this is, for many, they feel like this is the company for them. This was the company that they had been waiting and praying for so many years to get, and they've got it. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And it's different from the alternative that's why there's so much excitement around it. But at the same time, and trust me, I get plenty of this, there are people that will get mad when Tony Khan so much as breathes.
I was just going to say that. Do you think as well?
Go for it.
Do you think as well, because their fans are so passionate, that is why maybe they were a bit harder, like on, for example, the Brandy Road stuff, I'm trying to think of other examples, but you know what I mean.
Sure. When they stumble, yeah.
Yeah.
People have different criticisms for different reasons. Many of them are valid, but some, honestly, are just people that love WWE so much, or that's all they've ever known, that they'll reject anything else. That their previous attempts to try and find an alternative with things like, mid to late 2000s TNA faltered. TNA's impact is still around, but it's not what it was, and it wasn't. No. It's not what it was attempting to be there when it started running on Mondays in 2010. Yeah.
Was that when it ran for like 3 weeks?
Yeah, I think it was 8. Yeah, those were an interesting few weeks. I don't really sympathize with the people that don't want to give AEW any chance at all, because it's like, look, they're trying to give you something different. If you don't like it, you don't like it, but you don't need to just crap on it because it's not WWE. Because that's all we're used to. I'm up for people just enjoying what they like, but not tearing down other people for what they don't like. Frankly, I don't watch much Joshi wrestling, but I got some friends who are huge Joshi fans, and you know what? More power to them. Enjoy it.
The way I look at wrestling is, the more companies are there, the more people, there's more places for wrestlers to work.
For sure.
So
Absolutely.
If we break down your working week, what are you required to watch for work? And then how do you put like an article together?
Right. So for me, I work, my schedule right now is Sunday through Thursday. It's definitely not the 9 to 5 most people tend to work. It's depending on the day, my shifts are different. Like I work nights, Mondays and Wednesdays, because I cover Raw and Dynamite. I don't work Fridays, so I don't have to cover SmackDown. Pay-per-view Sundays, regardless of whatever's happening, I'm starting at 10 a.m. and then work all the way up and through the show, depending on how late it goes. Like last night was a bit late, but the nons,
A bit early
the
in my
Sundays
case.
where there are, for you guys, I do not envy you guys over there. I am sorry for that. That is, because when someone told me like, yeah, the show started at 3 a.m., I'm like, oh God, it's you guys, like for us, that's New Japan. Like New Japan starts at 3 a.m. You guys are willing to hop on this thing, once a month, and bravo to you. But yeah, so cover Raw, cover Dynamite. I have another writer. His name's Matt Aguilar, very talented guy. He covers NXT and SmackDown, and keeps an eye on Rampage, even though that tends to not be very newsworthy. And as far as stories go, it entirely depends on what's out there. If we've interviewed somebody and we've got a quote that we feel fans are interested in, like I just published an interview I did with Adam Cole last week that kind of ran concurrently with Dynamite. Yeah, that one, we had him in studio. Honestly, I just got him to talk for 15 minutes about Halo because I knew he was a huge Halo fan. And they had a new game come out. The show is coming out soon. And, he just opened up about that. And, that was the most fun I've had in an interview in a long time, because it's always fun to get the wrestlers to talk about things other than wrestling, because they get asked about that to absolute death.
Yeah.
But when you ask them about something that they like elsewhere, they'll talk about it for hours.
Mm-hmm.
As far as like constructing a story, is it something newsworthy? Is it something entertaining? Is it something people are talking about? Twitter or Reddit are great directions for that. And then going from there, and do you want me to get into like the construction for like each story, like how you write them, or how deep do you want me to get into this?
Briefly, like how you write them. Do you use a computer? Do you write them in paper?
No. I'm on a computer right now, and I use the computer for all that. Typically the first couple of paragraphs are the newsworthy stuff. If it's from an interview, I'll use the quotes. And you'll note it, and you've probably noticed if you follow different wrestling news sites, that it's basically like one integrated web. If one website, I'll use an example, Wrestling Inc. If they get the transcript for one particular interview, you'll see 8 other websites within the hour run the same quote, but link themselves back to Wrestling Inc. and say, hey, here's where we got the transcript. You see a lot of that. And we take part in plenty of that. But we also try to do some of our own transcribing, and obviously, when it's a story from something we've done an interview on, then we are the source. And then for the back half, because here's a little trick of the trade is, when it comes to things like Facebook and Google, they want stories to be a particular length. Mm-hmm. They don't want it to just be 100 to 200 words, because those are easy for those fake spam websites that you sometimes find yourself on. Those articles tend to be pretty short, and they figured that out. So they said, hey, in order to reward you, we want these stories to be a particular length.
It's like you put the work in, we'll reward you, sort of thing.
Exactly. So if I'm short on, oh shoot, this story is only 250 words right now, what am I gonna do? Well, what we do is called backfilling, which is, hey, if I'm writing about CM Punk and I have a quote that's only 2 lines worth that says, yeah, I'd like to fight for the AEW World Championship, I'm like, okay, I need to fill out the rest of this. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to a previous story where he's also talked about fighting for the world championship and say, here's what he said about the same subject last September. I just wrote a story like this one. And his answer for how he talked about challenging Hangman was quite different from how he talked about challenging Kenny right when he had started and just fought Darby. So I thought, what? This gives a little bit more context to the story. It's, a bit wordy, but if people want to keep reading on that far, more power to them. So yeah, that's some of the few steps for how to write simple stuff.
When you take information from other people's articles, are you required to source them?
Oh, and I always do every time. You
Yeah.
source them, you say where you got them, you link back to that story, either right there in the quote or at the bottom of the story. You know, there are sites that don't do that. They don't attribute. You know, that was something I learned in school really quickly was, you know, if it's any information from anywhere else, just, you know, or if it's a report.
So did I, because I've got a degree in media and journalism.
Oh, there you go. Well, great. Well, awesome. Welcome to the team. Yeah, no, it's, you know, some don't do that. I've always felt like that is the simplest thing in the world to do is attribute. So yeah, that's, you know, I never hesitate with that.
What about when like you get, I don't want to say accused, but like told, oh, this story is definitely fake, or like, I'm trying to figure out how to phrase this question. Please help me out here.
When someone says it's fake news or says it's you know, dirt sheet bull crap kind of thing.
Yeah, but you know for a fact it's real. How do you sort of defend yourself?
Well, I mean, the easiest thing to do is ignore Facebook comments, because that is a cesspool I want no part of. So when people try to comment on that stuff and say, oh, it's just fake dirt sheet stuff, I'm like, I'm not, first of all, I'm not giving you the oxygen to even warrant a response. But when, you know, I never write anything that doesn't come from people that I trust. You know, yeah. I have a list internally of reporters that when they write something and they say, hey, this is, you know, this is what I've heard from sources, without naming them, because, you know, you're not going to name your sources. That, you know, when people ask for that, I'm like, okay, you clearly don't know what we do if you think we're just going to start naming sources. I know who the professionals are. You know, I know who's trustworthy from my interactions with them, from how they present themselves, to their track record trying to break other stuff. You know, you've got to have a good, you know, for lack of a better term, a good BS detector. Like, you've got to be able to know, like, okay, this guy's full of crap, or no, this guy, you know, he's got a legitimate background. Let's take what he has to say. And then if it turns out he's completely lying, you remember that for next time. You know, people will talk about our field often and say that, oh, they just make everything up. The people that just make things up out of the blue, those people don't stick around for too long.
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, because, you know, you could probably name a couple of people that tried to pop up in the past couple of years, you know, pretending to be authentic. And then as soon as they're found out, within months, nobody's talking about them anymore.
No.
No matter how many reports they throw out, nobody's sourcing them anymore.
How long do you think it takes to build credibility as a journalism in wrestling? Could it be off one story, or do you think you need multiple stories?
I think it's just, you need a series of reputable stories. I never claim to be someone that's trying to get backstage inside scoops. I could, you know, I have the people I could talk to that would know certain things, but I've found that there's no, at least from my end, there's no point for that. You know, to some, and I've worked for some. I worked for Ryan Satin back when he was writing Pro Wrestling Sheet. You know, he made a very successful career out of being the guy that had the inside track on things. I've met Sean Ross Sapp on a number of occasions. Wonderful guy. That's how he's made his living. You know, that's how he presents himself. But there are others out there that don't claim to be, you know, guys that are the scoopsters, the inside source guys with the breaking news and different reports, that, you know, are wonderful and do wonderful work. I think you're wearing a Cultaholic shirt. Am I correct?
Yeah.
I adore those guys. I love what they do. I'm checking out them and wrestle. The first thing I do when I wake up in the morning and I check YouTube, I'm listening to them and I'm listening to Wrestle Talk. neither of them, none of their teams claim to, hey, we've got the inside track on stuff. Doesn't make them any less, excellent at what they do. And I also know that they have a good sense of like, okay, whatever we're reporting, whether it's aggregation or their own opinion, I know that it's legitimate, that they're not just going to be like, oh yeah, Basement News with a Z reports that Samoa Joe's going to Ring of Honor. Like, no,
Yeah.
they know who's legitimate, just like I do.
How about if you've lost credibility? Do you think it's possible to build it back up again?
It is, but it's hard. So don't try to out-trick people. Don't try to outsmart people. Don't lie. Don't lie to your audience. Don't claim that you have information when you don't. Don't claim to have sources when you don't. Be upfront. Like we said earlier, people like transparency. So when you lose credibility, or even if you report a story and your sources said one thing and then something else turned out to be true because either they lied or plans changed, be upfront, admit your mistake, and then try again and do it right this time. Because people are willing to forgive when you make a mistake. You make 5 of the same mistakes in a row, not so much.
Okay. What about, I asked you about how you build credibility, how you gain credibility again if you've lost it. What about how do you lose credibility as a journalist in the wrestling world?
Make stories up, just outright lie, spread rumors, go after people's personal lives, get into the weeds of the gossip about who's dating who, or who cheated on who with and when,
really
when you get into, oh yeah, 1,000%. But it's like when people dive into those weeds, it's like, but you're gonna lose your credibility when those headlines are popping up on your website that you claim to be reputable. The fly-by-night bloggers are not getting approved to sit in the press box at WrestleMania or be at Tony Khan's next press conference. You probably noticed if you've ever listened to those media conference calls,
it's similar people.
It's the same people, and they all come from outlets that you've probably, at least here in the States, you probably heard of them because they've built up a name for themselves.
You talked about their getting to go to press events. Is it something where you're reaching out to, say, Tony Khan and AEW's press liaisons and are like, okay, I work for this company, here's what we've done in the past? Or is it sort of you're getting a call from them saying like, we've got this event, do you want to be here?
Sure. So it's a little of both. When you're starting out, whether you're starting out in the industry or the news outlet that you work for is new to the wrestling world, you want to reach out to them. You want to reach out to their PR folks. You want to look for press events and be like, hey, can I take part in this? And if you come to them and you've got a good readership and you've got examples of work that prove that you're legitimate, they'll give you an opportunity. And then you've got to show up, be presentable, look professional, act professional.
Don't go in a Cutaholic t-shirt, for example.
No, like I'm wearing an NWO t-shirt. I'm not wearing this to a press event. I'm some folks are in jeans and a t-shirt. I'm usually in a blazer or suit. I like to take things up a notch. My buddy John Alba, that guy's always in a suit. You'll notice. So I kind of took that note from him. And then once you've done it, once you've presented yourself, they'll remember you. They'll keep you on the list for whenever you want to come, for whenever they want to start reaching out to the media. Because that's the thing about the wrestling companies is they want the attention from the news outlets. So when I first took over the wrestling section, this is February of 2019, we didn't get a lot of interviews. That just wasn't like we'd reach out and they'd get nothing.
Really? That surprises me, considering you're affiliated with
but
CBS.
Well, we weren't always. We were bought by them. We were bought by them in, I want to say it was February of 2018. And I was hopping around for reasons that had to do with management. I was hopping around to a couple of different roles before landing with the wrestling desk, which is what I always wanted to do in the first place. So, I started, repeatedly asking WWE's PR team, not in an annoying way or an overly aggressive, but in a consistent, like, hey, we'd love to talk to any of these people. Hey, this guy's having a title match on Raw this week. Can we talk to him? Hey, she just won a championship. Can we talk to her? Hey, they're headlining a pay-per-view. Could we talk to the winner on Monday? Phone interviews, and especially once COVID happened, and suddenly the idea of, okay, we're touring this town, take them to all the local news networks and the local newspapers. When that went away, they suddenly had to start relying on Zoom interviews.
This is how I started.
Which is just as easy as what we're doing right now. Like, this is the setup I have for when I want to talk to wrestlers. If you look at my Cody Rhodes interview, this same poster's in the background.
Yeah.
Then once you get on essentially that list of like, hey, they're reputable, let's go to them. Then the interviews start flowing. To the point where with WWE, pretty consistently, we're getting at least once or two a month. Ooh. With AEW, that was more of just I recognized that company was going to take off. And this was, mind you, this was like right in the early days where, you get bites of news each week, and being the elite was kind of, flowing things out, but we didn't know they were going to be on TNT. We didn't know what the pay-per-view schedule was going to look like. But I knew, no, we got to jump on this early and often so that when it's big, because it's going to be big, we're in. So I became I don't say I became friends with, but I became friendly with their PR team pretty quickly. I was at Fighter Fest, which was their second show ever.
Was that the one with the Cody Darby match?
Yep, with the chair shot. I remember my video with the Young Bucks explaining about what happened was like at the top of a squared circle there for a minute. Like MJF yelled at all of us in character, and then I was like, "Oh well, I'm never talking to you again because you can't break character."
Yeah, I couldn't do an interview with him.
No, I have no interest in, I respect wrestlers, I respect their craft, but if I'm going to talk to you, I want it to be the person that's not on TV, the person who are you when the cameras aren't rolling? Because, I don't.
That's more interesting to me.
Right. That's what people want to know. They want to know who the person is in real life. I don't interview Bryan Cranston as Walter White to ask Walter White questions. I want to talk to Bryan Cranston.
Yeah.
I don't talk to Robert we don't talk to Robert Pattinson. Like, my site's interviewed him a couple times.
No Batman spoilers, please.
No spoilers, but he is Batman.
I know that, but I haven't seen the film yet. So
no, that's fair. I won't spoil the movie, but we talk to him as Robert Pattinson. He doesn't go into his Bruce Wayne
and go
character.
Like, I'm Batman.
No, he doesn't do that. No, and that would, trust me, nobody would dare want to do that because no one's going to want to talk to you. Some wrestlers, unfortunately, don't get that memo. So,
do you think that will die out?
I think some people are just stubborn. Some, and I think Max is this way. He's recognized that not a lot of folks do it, so he stands out by being one of the few that don't. Bray Wyatt was another example. That guy, he'd be on local news networks. But be completely in the Firefly Funhouse character.
Really?
Oh yeah. Orange Cassidy doesn't break character unless it's like with ESPN or something.
Oh.
And I think that one was just like, okay, I want to do one where I'm not, and then go back to just.
How do I phrase this? Like, how different is your interview style when you're interviewing a wrestler that's in character to a wrestler that's out of character?
Well, they're rare because I don't seek them out. When they're in character and they refuse to break, you kind of you play along with it a little bit. You try and ask them a question that you can get an answer out of, even if it's just their persona taking over. You try and basically aim them in the direction of an answer, as opposed to just them ranting and raving like they're back in the ring holding a microphone. Then you kind of have to play the Mean Gene role, essentially, and just kind of let it bounce off. Yeah.
So as we look at wrapping this up, because I do really want to be respectful of your time.
Well, we got time.
We're going to do a segment that I call generic questions, which are questions that I'm sure you get asked on Twitter a lot, but now you can have a place to be like, look, I've answered this. Just go watch this.
Sure.
So, favorite match of all time?
Jeez. I hope this is not rapid fire because this is going to take a minute.
That's cool.
Oh, Michael's Undertaker at Mania 26. Everyone says 25.
Yes!
I think 26 told a better story.
100% agree. That was my favorite match for the longest time before Cody Dustin. Favorite pay-per-view of all time?
Awesome. Yeah, Shiz is up there too. There's probably a few AEW ones, but yeah, Michael's Taker is usually my go-to.
Ooh, favorite pay-per-view of all time?
Well, All Out 21 has got to be up there now because I was there. And
I was just going to separate this. One that you liked sitting on your couch at home, and then one that you loved being at.
Because I was there. Okay, I was there for All Out 21, so that is definitely my favorite. Show that I sat down and watched. Jeez. Probably I didn't go back and watch it until WrestleMania X7 really is as people say it is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. And it's like he's great. Halloween Havoc 98 for the Sting Bret Hart and the Goldberg DDP match. One of the Wrestle Kingdoms.
No love to Hogan Warrior then.
No,
I'm joking.
No, that is very much a 2-match show, but the 2 matches are all timers.
Fair enough. Favorite superstar of all time?
So specifically WWE?
Okay, favorite wrestler of all time. I should phrase that as really.
Okay. It changes. I'll say AJ Styles.
Ooh. Favorite wrestler as a kid?
Batista. Batista was my guy. And so many people want him. I don't know why. I love the guy.
What is your thoughts on his acting career?
I think he's fantastic. I think you can tell, and he says as much in his interviews with Pressure. He wants to get inside the minds of characters and understand their pathos much more than just, hey, I want to be the generic action guy that shoots guns.
Yeah.
He brings more humanity to Drax than I think most actors could. I don't think you would put someone like The Rock or John Cena in a Blade Runner movie, but you would put him in there because, for as big as he is, he's very introspective.
He's very good as a comedic actor as well.
Oh, he's fantastic. But I dig the serious roles where he's introverted, introspective, soft-spoken. I think he is going to have a fantastic career as long as directors recognize that he is more than just a meathead. Like, I love the Dune movie that came out last year. He did frustratingly little in that one. for as good as that movie is, he does so little. And I'm like, man, you've got a legitimate actor here, not just a big muscle head. Ironic, because that's the same director that did Blade Runner 2049, and he had it figured out with that one. So who knows? Maybe they've got that plan for the sequel.
Favorite theme song of all time?
Oh, man, you have stepped into Pandora's box, because I adore wrestling themes. How about this? I'll give you two, because it's hard for me to pick. So I will just say this: AJ Styles and Christian Cage are two wrestlers who have had nothing but great themes wherever they went. Christian had great goofy themes in WWE. I love his theme now, even though it's an Evanescence knockoff, because it's the same one he had in TNA. AJ Styles has like 5 great ones, and they have all been on my workout playlist at some point. So,
what's your thoughts on his current one?
They don't want none. Oh, it's catchy as hell. It's. I know it wasn't made for him, but it fits him so well.
Who is it made for? Nakamura, wasn't it?
No, it wasn't Nakamura. I think it was. I want to say it was Curtis Axel.
Really?
Him? It was. Yeah, it was. It was either him or James Storm. It was someone innocuous who they wanted the whole redneck bit thrown in there.
It was James Storm.
No. It was Storm, because Curtis Axel was supposed to get Dolph Ziggler's old theme, Perfection. That didn't happen. I get those mixed up. When you hear about songs that were made for one wrestler, yet wind up with another, that is always fascinating. Like this fire burns from this fire from Killswitch Engage, I always associate with Punk. Ironic, because he pulled out the AFI song last night. But that was made for Randy Orton. He tried it once, and it's like you listen to it, you're like, that didn't fit at all, but it fits perfectly with Punk. So yeah, that I always find fascinating. So to answer your question, one of AJ's, one of Christian's, Roman Reigns' current one. I even love Steve Austin's Disturbed version. That's a great one.
Was that the one with Talking in it?
Yeah, with David Draymond from Disturbed, like giving it lyrics. Like, it's corny as hell and the most new metal thing ever, but I adore it. The Rock's Hollywood theme and his current theme. Edge's Metalingus. So many. Kenny's theme. That one's on my playlist now. More
I
so
love
than
Battle
Devil
Cry.
Cry. Battle Cry is fantastic.
Wrestling guilty pleasure.
For the longest time, it was Lucha Underground, because that was the goofiest freaking show. But I loved it. And I so wish that had stuck around. I know they're trying with MLW, but it just doesn't feel the same. It doesn't have that grit. Guilty pleasure. Is it cheating if I just say the Young Bucks? No,
not if you elaborate on why.
I'm not gonna. So, yeah, the Young Bucks.
Okay.
They are hateable.
What?
Lost you there for a second, buddy.
Yeah, I lost you too.
Tom? Sorry, Tom, you there?
Yeah, I got you now.
I mean, they're hateable. They're supposed to be hateable.
Oops, that was me. Yeah, that was me. I can hear you now.
Okay. Well, to answer your question, Young Bucks, they're hateable. They're supposed to be hateable. They're obnoxious. Their outfits are ridiculous. The freaking goatees and the dyed hair and the dangly earrings. And I love it all because they're trying to be obnoxious as possible. And people keep taking it at face value. And I'm like, guys, that's the point.
Yeah.
Like that. And as kind of a follow-up, people always complain about, some wrestlers have too much lore behind them. They try to give themselves a little too much backstory. No, give me more. I'm a comic book guy. I love it when you've got 20 pages worth of backstory. I interviewed Malachi Black last December, and the interview was just me asking about his character. I asked about the eye and the mask and the music and the Devil Made Me Do It short film he put out. and whether or not that was connected in continuity to the Buddy Matthews videos that came out. Short answer, they're not, but they did ask about that to each other. And people are like, oh, you know what? This has too much lore. The Bray Wyatt stuff, it's got too much lore behind it. It's too complicated. No, give me more of it. Give me all.
What's your thoughts on
Firefly
Funhouse match?
Ooh, that is a masterpiece. As someone who grew up through the entire John Cena era, from start to finish, every single criticism that has ever been lobbied at him was in that match somewhere. And that was fascinating. And I would like to think we are never going to find ourselves in that situation where we're able to get something like that again. You know, fingers crossed, we don't have the world shut down from another pandemic. But because of the situation they found themselves in, they had to get creative. And Wyatt is such a creative mind, and Cena is too. And Cena, that match doesn't work if Cena doesn't play along. If Cena is not like, no, you know what? I'm going to address all of this. I'm going to address every criticism. There's a moment, it's like 5 seconds, and you got to pause it to catch every frame, where every failure of his career is like flashes on screen, from Carlito to Van Dam at Hammerstein to CM Punk walking away. All of it. It's all there. And the more you dug into it, the more you were rewarded with, hey, this is how Vince McMahon thinks of wrestlers. And this is how Cena is like Hogan to some sense as a bully. And how him beating up a stuffed pig at the end was the closest we were ever going to see to John Cena turning heel. But he turned. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things that he did, but it counts because he finally took that chair and swung, and then just starts beating up mercilessly on the childlike. He was beating up on the rabbit, and it was like he's beating up on the childlike innocence, the one that's the actual fan. And I'm like, you can't get that in a normal match. And you were never going to get that from John Cena, of all people. You were never going to get that under any other circumstances. So I think it is a magnum opus for Wyatt. And when people list the 10 great John Cena matches of all time, you know, long decades from now, this has to be somewhere in that conversation, even though it's not a match.
Yeah.
And that's fascinating. And like, I was all about that. That made my like top. I think I put out a top 5 matches that year. It made it. Like, even though it's not a match, I didn't care. I loved it.
I'm the same. So as we wrap this up, where can the good people find you?
So they can find me at Connor Casey CB on Twitter. You can find all of my writing at comicbook.com, specifically the WWE section, but don't be alarmed. We don't just cover WWE, cover AEW, a little bit of Impact. Ring of Honor's back, so we're going to figure out what's going on there. New Japan from time to time. We've got everything. And as far as that website goes, anything geek news, if you're into it, we've got it, and we've got it in spades. So we are really your one-stop shop for all of that. You can follow me on Instagram at Connor Casey CB. You can find me on podcasts. I usually pop up on Comic Book Nation at least once a month, either before or after wrestling pay-per-views. You can bet I'll be on for the WrestleMania stuff coming up. Find us on YouTube at Comic Book. My interview, like I said, my interview with Adam Cole, the full video just went up. I've got ones with we got Paul White and Mark Henry. We had them doubled up in the studio. That will be coming up here pretty soon. It's a very fun one.
It might be out by the time this goes out, because this is going to be sat on for a while.
Well, it just might be. So if it is out, go find it. It's a hoot. Yeah. And you can usually find me on Twitter spouting off my opinions. But you can, but everything you can find me writing wise, that it's over there on Comic Book.
Mm-hmm. And as we wrap this up, Connor, the question I end all my interviews on is with YouTube, with podcasting, even with writing. We're all going to live forever in some sort of way. So what is one article that you really want the people to check out to know your body of work? What is one podcast you really want the people to check out to know your body of work? And then what is, for that question, for those subjects, should I say, what is one that you're like, don't check those out. I've grown a lot since then.
Sure. Well, gosh, one article. I pride myself on being a fairly decent interviewer. I'm not going to, sit here and beat my chest and say I'm better than the ones you've heard of, but I consider myself to be pretty good. I take a lot of pride in those interviews. So if you look at some of my recent work with Adam Cole, with Cody Rhodes, I did one with Mustafa Ali last year. I was particularly proud of because he wasn't doing many interviews. I would say check some of those out. If you're looking for in-depth feature stuff, before I was doing this, I was a sports writer for one of USA Today's newspapers called the Mansfield News Journal, which is a small town in Ohio. I found a lot of great personal stories there. And particularly one, oh God, this one was nuts. This is about 2017. And there was a big auto show that was coming to the IndyCar circuit. IndyCar is kind of like NASCAR here. But we had a track here there in town. And there was a massive car show that came out. And with it came some entertainment. And one of it was this thing. It was called, I want to say it was called a hyperdrome. It was basically, it's these carnival stunts where guys will get on these motorcycles and will go in circles so fast that they are able to go up along the walls as if there's no gravity. And they'll go up 10, 15 feet in the air, and you have fans standing yay high up on bleachers that can look down and see all these crazy stunts these guys on these motorcycles are doing. And I interviewed them when they came to town. And the guy that ran it had actually just come back he had cancer in his jaw. And I got to see his first ride in about 3 years.
Oh, wow.
After coming back from that. And I got to talk to him and so many of the other people that were a part of it. And it was really just this tight-knit little traveling family. People talk about wrestling being a carny show. This was so much more carny than that. But they were great people. And to hear their stories and to hear him come back from everything he had gone through, to come back to doing what he loved and to do it effortlessly. Because if you had just watched that morning show, you wouldn't have known that was his first time back in years and everything he had come back from. I might post that story on Twitter whenever this drops, just so people can check that one out. But that one has definitely stuck with me. A podcast, any of the ones from Comic Book Nation where I'm on, and maybe I'm not talking about wrestling, I'm talking about movies or TV shows that I'm passionate about. That's just me talking with friends. That never feels like work. I always enjoy those, and I always feel like people that listen to those definitely get their money's worth. As far as something you don't want, I was on a trivia show recently with Johnny Gargano where I lost on a last second question. So nobody needs to go check that out.
Okay.
Actually, John, you asked about interviews I'm proud of. Johnny Gargano. I talked to him in January. This was weeks after he had left, and he only talked to like one other outlet. Was
this pre the baby?
This was pre-baby. This was about a month before the baby was due. I've only reached out to him since to wish him congratulations. I haven't talked to him in an interview since, but we went for a good 30 minutes. And I was proud of how that was handled. He was fantastic. You can talk to him for hours about Spider-Man and Star Wars, and we talked for quite a bit about that. But I also, talked to him about like the big decision of, hey, why leave? Why take a break? You're the pillar of this brand, and I think you always will be in some way. Why step away? And he wasn't afraid to talk about that. So yeah, definitely check out that interview.
Is that on the same site? Yeah.
That's on the same site that is on Comic Book. Yes.
Okay. And then as we wrap this up, just remind the people where they can find you.
Twitter at Connor Casey CB, Instagram, same handle, comicbook.com.
Right. I want to say thank you to Connor for coming on. If you guys like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow me on Twitter at Tom Talks Rubbish. Follow bodyslam.net because I will be working for them by the time this drops out. So
Hey.
I will see you in the next one. Bye. Bye.
Peace.